I'm here to present 1059, which will assist legal cannabis industry by alleviating some of the tremendous tax burdens that are placed on this industry. Here's an industry that's just 7 years in existence, and it's struggling to survive. It's struggling because of the high taxes, the excessive regulatory hurdles, and various challenges that the cannabis business faces that have done little to help the legal cannabis market succeed the way the voters had intended with Prop 64 8 years ago. This bill does two things specifically. It prohibits a local jurisdiction from including the state's excess tax and sales tax from their definition of gross receipts for the purpose of local cannabis taxes. This would eliminate the local government's collection of a tax on a tax. No other industry has a tax on a tax. Taxing the tax and ultimately increasing prices, purchase prices, I should say, pushes consumers away from the legal retailers and only worsens the continued struggle of the cannabis retailers. Currently, it's almost a 47% markup versus legal versus illegal. Secondary, the bill eliminates the authority of the CDTFA to impose a 50% penalty on cannabis licensees' delinquent taxes. This 50% penalty is on top of other penalties that the licensees already must pay, including a 10% fee for failing to file a return or filing late, a 25% penalty for fraud or intent to evade regulations, and a $500 penalty for failing to furnish a return or a report. This 50% penalty is punitive. It creates a significant hardship for licensees who are already struggling with the various changes, I should say, to the cannabis laws and has not been successful in increasing compliance. The legislature has made changes to Prop 64 before, as recently as 2022, when we stopped the collection of the cultivation tax. Although the voters approved this penalty in Prop 64, it is clear to me and all the legal operators in this industry that this penalty is not helping the cannabis market succeed. It's only aiding in the overly excessive penalties to this business that are already overtaxed and overburdened. All that being said, I understand the committee's concerns, and will be willing to accept your amendments, and I thank you for your aye vote today, and we have two witnesses here willing to testify.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Senator Bradford. Witnesses, you'll each have 2 minutes. I'm going to step out for just a moment, so Vice Chair Wynn's going to take over. I'll be right back.
Please go forward.
Sure. Please let me apologize for the amount of information I feel I need to give every committee hearing so that we are all in the same context of what the problems are, what the environment looks like, and what the future holds if we continue at this trajectory. AB 195 changed everything when it came to the purpose and intent of the voters of Prop 64. We eliminated the cultivation tax collection, moved the collection of excise tax away from the distributor license, moved the calculation of excise tax from the wholesale price level to a gross receipts level. When we changed that collection, the excise tax was charged and calculated to including taxing other taxes. All taxes are due and remitted by the retailer now under this new law. This undue hardship and stress is exacerbated by the threat and the implementation of a 50% penalty on any late or underpaid taxes. AB 195 was unanimously voted in by the Senate and the Assembly. CDTFA just recently stated that 15% of cannabis operators were in default of sales and use tax obligations, with another 15% that were late or in existing payment programs. CDTFA just estimated that over 15% are in default of excise tax obligations, with another 15% that are late or in payment programs. That is $300 million in default back taxes and $300 million in late taxes or in payment programs. If we add a 50% penalty to $600 million in back taxes, we now have close to $1 billion of debt and taxes that are owed, including penalties and fees. The DCC just estimated that 40% of licensees will go 15 days beyond their contract with accounts receivable for vendor payments. And another 40% of that 40% will be over a year late. I'm saying all this so we can understand the level of debt that this industry is currently in, and exacerbating that with a 50% penalty is doing nothing to support the industry's growth and to support the fact that we're trying to eliminate the illegal market. A medium and large size dispensary has $10 million in revenue. That is a $1.5 million in excise tax, $1 million in sales tax, and $1 million in local taxes. Any of those that are underpaid or not paid, you lose your license or you have $750,000 in penalties and fees. We need to rein this in, and I think passing this bill will at least put us in a good direction. Jerred, Kiloh with the United Cannabis Business Association.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Thank you.
Please stick with 2 minutes, please.
Yes, Madam Chair and members, Amy Jenkins on behalf of the California Cannabis Industry Association. I will be brief. I think what Mr. Kiloh said, I'll just emphasize, we are in a state of crisis. Recent data from CDTFA does paint a fairly bleak picture. Our tax balance, as we understand it, is $287 million and growing. We are estimating a total $600 million, which I think Mr. Kiloh mentioned. We're increasingly listed on CDTFA's list of top 500 sales and use tax delinquencies. I think the primary goal, I'll just emphasize, of Proposition 64, which was referenced first and no less than 5 additional times, again, voter intent and purpose, was to get rid of the illicit market. More specifically, to establish tax measures that undermine illicit sales, deter illegal production and distribution, and present the unlawful diversion of cannabis, and to generate hundreds of millions of dollars in new state revenue annually. It ought to be self-evident, but that is not happening, and that is why this bill is here today before you. For these reasons, CCI wholeheartedly supports this bill as a proud co-sponsor and thanks the author for his leadership on this critical issue. Thank you.
Thank you. At this time, any witnesses in opposition? Any individual who would like to state in opposition? Seeing none, at this time, we'll move to members, colleagues. Senator Baker?
Sure, I'll just say that whenever this topic comes up, I know it needs to be fixed, and I'm glad there are people working on fixing it, and just appreciate it. I'll move the bill when appropriate time.
Thank you. Senator Kiloh?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Avoiding charging a tax on a tax is sensible and very good tax policy, which we don't practice all the time, by the way, like on gasoline, but I digress. Under the heading of the Department of Redundancy Department, you weren't here when we heard Senator Laird's bill, but my comment is the same. I will support this legislation, but we are attempting to fix an unfixable thing. Proposition 64, it has been mentioned that it's in crisis situation, and I don't think we can change that under the details of Prop 64, as is stated in this analysis to, again, the Department of Redundancy Department, but I said this before, it begs the question of a comprehensive discussion of the foundational and structural challenges of Proposition 64 as a whole, and any tinkering around the edges of the current system will continue to have a dysfunctional current system, and I think the only real cure to that is a fundamental change to 64, which we would have to put on the ballot. As I mentioned before, I did not support Proposition 64, and I wouldn't support it today if it was up for the first time, but it is the law of the land, and the only way we can change it to try to make it functional is if the legislature puts a proposition on the ballot to do that. All of these changes really beg that fundamental question.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to the author for bringing this bill forward. And, you know, I believe when voters speak, and it's our job to make Prop 64 work, and this is an example of the work that continues. My question is, you know, I understand the debt. My question is, how do you all, do you have challenges in trying to calculate what the tax burden is? I'm curious how you do that. In terms of, you know, how do you calculate how much is owed, and is that, what level of burden is it to even come up with that number? I'm curious how that happens.
As an operator and someone who has been a part of this regulatory process for the last 7 years, when the law changed under AB 195, we asked for clarity, not only from our city, but from our state. And November, I think it was the 24th of the year before it's going to change in January, we're giving a little bit of guidance. But that guidance was actually in conflict with local law. So then we had CDTFA communicate, especially to the LA Office of Finance, to say, who is going to be the last tax? You both have claimed you're the last tax and you're taxing other taxes. How do we do this? It is only recently in the last month that the Office of Finance in Los Angeles finally gave out, now we're talking like we're almost a year into this, that they finally gave guidance on what they would like you to do to estimate your taxes. The state gave guidance, I think it was in April of this year, to also give guidance, which is 5 to 11 months past when we were supposed to start calculating it. It is not only confusing for even the government agencies, but very confusing for the operators. And anything we do wrong is a penalty, it's a fee, or it's a threat of your license being removed. All of those things add stress, not only to the employees, but also to the business owners and the community in general. Like, we don't know what to do. And even what we got as guidance from the Office of Finance said, well, instead of charging 10% gross receipts tax, because you have to tax the excise tax, charge 12.99% to make sure you cover your butt for the Office of Finance. Well, guess what they said to do with excise tax at the state level? Instead of charging 15%, charge 16.5% to the customer so that you are covering your butt for the state, thus increasing the taxes on the taxes, which is why we're here. And this is the second time we've run this bill, because it's not only confusing, it's punitive, and it doesn't even make sense at this point that we're taxing things that aren't even services or goods.
Well, thank you for that in-depth overview. And the complexity really reinforces the need for this bill and for us to continue to do the work. So thank you again to Senator Bradford.
All right, Senator Archuleta.
Thank you, Senator Bradford, bringing this forward. Obviously, there's a problem in the industry, and I don't think when we passed Prop 64 it was to be punitive to the business owner, to be punitive for those that wanted to expand their horizons and be part of the business community, to be punitive for those that are trying to provide for their families. And I think that now we analyze what we've done, we've got to clarify it and level the ship. And to a degree, when we hear about tax upon tax, and again, that's a problem. And of course, where you get deeper and deeper and deeper in debt, and eventually your doors close, because that's what's going to happen to the small business owner, those that we're trying to protect in the inner cities, those that we're trying to be part of the equality in this. So I think that we have to go along with this bill because it'll straighten the ship out somewhat. It's not going to be perfect, and I'm sure there's amendments to follow. And I know you're going to probably talk about the repealing the current penalty, but making some adjustments. And I'm sure you're going to be working with committee on that. So I think we have a movement on the bill. And,
I believe we do. I think we have a
supporting the bill.
motion from Senator Becker. All right. Did you want an opportunity to close, Senator Bradford?
Yes, I just want to thank the chair and the committee for working with me on this issue. And as you heard from the witnesses, this is a very onerous situation that we find ourselves in, because we were so desperate on passing Prop 64 that we took a proposition that was really poorly written, that was laden with a whole lot of pitfalls, that really didn't help stand up to industry, but we were just so desperate for passing something to legalize what is a plant. And what we really need to do is get past the stigma of calling what was God-made a drug versus what is man-made, which is truly a drug. This is a plant that was here before all of us, and some of the onerous penalties on this is because of the stigmas that we still have as it relates to cannabis. This is a straightforward measure, and I would just say one of the previous witnesses on a previous issue was in this industry 2 years ago. They're no longer in this industry because of these exorbitant tax. This industry has not grown legally. It's only grown illegally. And for that reason, I respectfully ask for your aye vote.
Okay, thank you very much.